I think corporate responsibility will be a mainstream part of at least some segment of business in Australia by 2020. In particular, those large publicly listed companies, even at this point, would I think claim to at least have aspects of corporate responsibility. I think the real question is, what is corporate responsibility going to look like in 2020, and is the corporate responsibility that we're going to have in 2020, is that going to be capable or able to bring about the significant change that we need, both at the level of business in terms of the way that it's organised, and also in terms of the impact that business will have on the communities and its various stakeholders around it. And there are a couple of critical dimensions to that, and one is, to what extent is corporate responsibility going to be integrated or embedded in corporations and in business, by 2020. Now, one of the disappointing things, I guess, is that people started to argue around in 2000 that what we needed was corporate responsibility to be more integrated. We're now at 2010, and in the last decade, we've seen very little progress in terms of corporate responsibility integration among those large publicly listed companies. So that's one thing. So are we going to see an increase in the extent to which corporate responsibility is integrated over the next 10 years? The second question, I guess, is deeper than that, and that is, even if corporate responsibility is integrated to a much higher extent and level than what it is today, is even that enough to bring about the kind of change that is required, and is to minimise some of the negative impacts that corporations currently have on society? I believe that the evidence and my own views is that it's not. So that even if we do have an integrated version of corporate responsibility, it is not enough to bring about significant societal transformation in terms of business. I think there is a need for business to change, clearly, and they need to incorporate that. But I think the other change that I'd like to see is that in 10 years' time, rather than talking about corporate responsibility, we're talking about what I like to refer to as conscious business. And by conscious business, there are several things. One is that business or corporations have a purpose that is broader than just maximising profits or maximising shareholder wealth. The second thing is that they are managing their business for all their stakeholders, for the benefit of all their stakeholders within the ecosystem that they find themselves. The third feature of a conscious business is that the leaders of that business or that corporation follow a model that's known as servant leadership, and it's a leadership that is spiritually based and spiritually informed, rather than the kind of externally focused leadership that we see today. The fourth feature of a conscious business, I would argue, is that the way that those businesses are designed, from everything from its governance systems to its workplace and so on, follow what in the new science is referred to as complex adaptive systems. And these are systems that like weather patterns, heartbeats, these are living organisms. And so we see organisations that are modelled on complex adaptive systems rather than the traditional mechanistic way of designing a business. And related to that, we're all familiar with the concept of financial capital, social capital, and so on. I think businesses need to start creating what's referred to as spiritual capital, as well as that. And I think the other feature too, two other features, is that they need to be places of work where people feel that they can bring their whole selves to work, so that they're actually nourishing people's spirit and their soul, as well as what they do in their day-to-day life. And then finally, that the way that the corporation again is formed and develops is informed by the emerging worldview, and the emerging worldview is a combination of several of those factors that I've already talked about. So I think one of the key things that if we are to see real transformation and real change, we need to move beyond corporate responsibility and towards what I refer to, and some others are starting to refer to, as conscious business. I mean, bringing about that change, I guess, is the critical question. Some people would see that change coming about by what Paul Hawken has referred to as the blessed unrest, the millions of social enterprises, NGOs, community organisations that are working away at a whole range of these issues around the world. And one of the, we have seen greater connectivity among those organisations through technology, but there is still a great need, I think, for those organisations to better coalesce, to work together, to bring about some of those changes. I mean, another source of change, I guess, is internal within organisations themselves, and I think that's possible. And we do have examples of organisations that have changed internally, but I think that's limited given where we're at and the criticality of some of the issues that society is facing. The third source of change, I guess, relates back to that issue that I referred to of spiritual capital, and linked to that is this notion of spiritual intelligence. I think we need to draw on, and when I say we, I mean activists, thinkers, policymakers. We need to start using not just our IQ, not just our EQ, our emotional intelligence, but also our spiritual intelligence. And by that, I mean it's a kind of intelligence that starts to enable us to look beyond the boundaries, to change the boundaries of the system, to change the nature of the system, to imagine things that we still don't know what they are going to look like. So it's quite a challenging task. And I guess, of course, the other source of change is always going to be through regulation and regulatory pressure. But I think it's not about the way that the debate has gone to date, which is, is it voluntary versus mandatory? It's about what kind of policies are going to facilitate the emergence of what I was referring to as complex adaptive systems.